You check your banking app on a Tuesday morning before work. $251,400. Retirement account, savings, a little brokerage account you started 3 years ago. You feel something close to relief. You made it. You crossed the line everyone talks about as the point where money stops being scary. Then an email lands in your inbox at 9:15. Company-wide restructuring. Your department is being consolidated. Your last day is in 3 weeks. Here is what nobody tells you about hitting $250,000. It does not buy you what you think it buys you. You assumed that number meant safety. But here's the thing. $250,000 in a retirement account and a brokerage account is not $250,000 in your checking account next month. Most of it is locked behind tax penalties, market timing, and accounts you were never supposed to touch before 60. The real number that protects you from a layoff in 2026 is not your net worth. It is your liquid runway. And for most people who feel financially secure, that runway is dangerously short. My name is Marcus, and I break down the real numbers behind American wealth so you can stop guessing about where you actually stand. If that sounds useful, hit subscribe because this channel is built for people who want the truth about money, not the highlight reel. Let's talk about the myth first. The myth is simple. Once your net worth crosses a big round number, 250,000, 500,000, a million, you are financially safe. Layoffs happen to other people who live paycheck to paycheck. You built a cushion. You are the exception. The reality looks very different. The July 2026 jobs report showed employers cut 23,000 positions, and previous months were revised down even further, which means the labor market has been quietly weaker than the headline 4.1% unemployment rate suggested for months. And once someone loses a job in this environment, they are not bouncing back in a few weeks. Roughly 1.8 million Americans have now been unemployed for 27 weeks or longer, according to recent labor force data. That is not a short bridge. That is half a year or more without a paycheck. So, why does $250,000 in net worth feel like protection when the data says otherwise? Because of what I call the bucket illusion. Picture your net worth as one big bucket of water. From a distance, it looks full. It looks like plenty. But that bucket is actually 5 or 6 smaller containers welded together, and only one of them has a spout you can actually pour from right now. Your 401k is a container with a lock on it until you are 59 and a half, unless you want to pay a 10% penalty on top of regular income tax. Your home equity, if you have any, is a container you can only access by selling the house or taking on new debt, and with the average 30-year mortgage rate sitting at 6.69%, that new debt is expensive. Your brokerage account looks liquid, but selling triggers capital gains taxes, and if the market is down the month you get laid off, you're selling low to survive. The bucket illusion is why so many people with real net worth still panic the moment a layoff hits. They're staring at a full bucket that will not pour. Let's do the actual math, because vague fear is not useful, but specific numbers are. Say your $250,000 breaks down like this. 160,000 in a 401k, 50,000 in home equity, 25,000 in a brokerage account, 15,000 in an actual checking or high-yield savings account you can withdraw today without penalty. That $15,000, not the $250,000, is your real emergency runway. If your monthly expenses run around $5,200, which is close to the average for a dual-income household carrying a mortgage in 2026, that $15,000 gives you roughly 2.9 months. Less than 3 months. Against a job search that, per the data we just covered, now averages closer to 6 months for a meaningful share of unemployed workers. That gap between how wealthy you feel and how long you can actually survive without income is the real number nobody talks about on social media. It is not your net worth. It is your months of true liquid runway. And for most Americans sitting at $250,000, that number is thinner than they think. Ask yourself honestly, if your income stopped tomorrow, not in theory, but literally tomorrow, how many of those 5 containers could you actually open without triggering a penalty, a tax bill, or a fire sale on your house? For most people, the honest answer is 1, maybe 2. That is the bucket illusion doing its work again, making a person feel rich while leaving them one bad quarter away from real financial stress. And the timing makes this worse than it would have been even 2 years ago. With the 30-year mortgage rate still sitting above 6.5%, refinancing to pull cash out of home equity costs far more than it used to, which means that container is even harder to open in a hurry. Meanwhile, the same July jobs data that showed those 23,000 cuts also showed weakness concentrated in exactly the kind of white-collar, mid-career roles that people assume are the safest. The layoffs are not just hitting warehouses and retail counters anymore. They are hitting the department managers and the senior analysts, the very people most likely to have crossed that $250,000 mark and to feel, wrongly, like they are untouchable. So, before we get into what one real household's numbers actually look like when a layoff hits, sit with this question for a second. Not what is my net worth, but what is my runway? Because those two numbers are answering completely different questions, and only one of them tells you how many months you have before you are forced to make decisions out of panic instead of strategy. Let's put a real face on this, because numbers only mean something when they belong to a person you can actually picture. Meet Danielle. 38 years old, senior operations manager at a mid-sized logistics company based just outside Columbus, Ohio. On paper, Danielle is exactly the kind of person who should feel financially untouchable. Her net worth sits at $263,000. Here is Danielle's breakdown before her layoff. $172,000 in her 401k, $48,000 in home equity on a house she bought 6 years ago, $22,000 in a taxable brokerage account, $12,400 in an actual savings account she can withdraw from today. Her monthly expenses, including a mortgage payment, 2 car payments, groceries, and childcare for her 7-year-old, run $5,600. On the Thursday she got the call, Danielle did the math the way most people do. She looked at $263,000 and thought, I have options. But when she sat down that weekend and actually separated what was truly liquid from what was locked, the picture changed fast. Her real, penalty-free, tax-free, sellable tomorrow runway was that $12,400. Divided by her $5,600 monthly expenses, that gave her 2.2 months. Not the years of cushion, the big number implied. Barely 9 weeks. But here's the thing that made Danielle's situation even harder. She assumed, like most people do, that a role at her level and her experience would fill back up fast. Instead, her job search stretched past 4 months, landing her closer to the growing group of long-term unemployed workers the labor data has been tracking all year. Somewhere around month 3, Danielle made the call almost everyone in her position eventually makes. She took an early withdrawal from her 401k, $10,000, which after the 10% penalty and income tax withholding landed in her account as closer to $7,200. The bucket finally poured. It just poured out a lot less water than the label on the outside suggested. Now, before you hear Danielle's story and start blaming her for not having a bigger cash cushion, I want to zoom out, because this is not a Danielle problem. This is a structural problem. The entire American retirement and saving system is built around accounts that reward you for locking money away and penalize you for accessing it exactly when a layoff makes access most necessary. Nobody sat Danielle down when she was 25 and explained that a 401k, the very account she was told to max out, would be functionally useless in the first 90 days of unemployment. Nobody explained that a rising mortgage rate environment would quietly turn her home equity from a safety net into a locked vault. She did everything she was told to do.
She saved.
She invested. She bought a home. And the system still left her 2 months of breathing room instead of 2 years. This is happening to millions of people at once, which is exactly why the labor data keeps showing more Americans stuck in long-term unemployment even as the headline unemployment rate stays relatively low.
It is not that people are not trying.
It is that the gap between paper wealth and usable cash has quietly widened for an entire generation of savers at the exact moment mortgage rates and living costs made that gap more dangerous than ever. If you are sitting there doing this math about your own accounts right now and feeling a little uneasy, that is not a personal failure. That is you finally seeing the system clearly for the first time. So, what do you actually do with this? Not tomorrow, not someday, but starting this week. First, calculate your real number. Not your net worth, your liquid runway in months. Add up only what you could access within 48 hours with no penalty, divide by your true monthly expenses, and write that number down somewhere you will actually see it. Second, treat that runway number, not your net worth, as the milestone you are building toward. A target of 3 to 6 months of true liquid runway will protect you far more than another $20,000 sitting in a 401k you cannot touch. Third, if your runway is under 2 months like Danielle's was, consider redirecting new contributions, even temporarily, away from retirement accounts and straight into a high-yield savings account until that cushion catches up. It feels counterintuitive. It is also the difference between weathering a layoff on your own terms and being forced into an early withdrawal that costs you thousands in penalties. Here is what I want you to take away from this. $250,000, $500,000, $1 million, none of those numbers are wrong to want. But none of them are the number that determines whether you sleep well the week after a layoff email lands in your inbox. That number is your runway. Small, specific, and completely within your control to change, starting with the very next paycheck you receive. Think back to Danielle for a second. 9 weeks after that layoff email, she was not thinking about her 401k balance. She was thinking about groceries, about her daughter's after-school program, about whether to touch the brokerage account or take the early withdrawal hit. The big number on her net worth statement did not answer a single one of those questions. Only her runway did. That is the entire point of this video, and it is worth repeating one more time. Net worth tells you what you have built. Runway tells you what you can actually survive on. They are not the same measurement, and treating them as interchangeable is exactly how someone with $263,000 ends up making a panic decision in month 3 instead of a calm one. If this changed how you think about your own numbers, that is exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one, because understanding the real math behind American wealth is the first step to actually building security instead of just the appearance of it. I will see you in the next one.